Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this important discussion today on the future of REDD+ financing. And REDD+ financing has never been more important in the fight to accelerate climate action because unfortunately the wholesale destruction of forests continues. We all know this. Just last year, we lost over 11 million hectares just of tropical forests. Of that, almost 4 million hectares of primary rainforest. Think about that. That's the equivalent of losing 10 football pitches a minute. Think about the biodiversity and the climate loss from that. Just in terms of the impact on climate change, it's the equivalent just of that primary rainforest, losing those almost 4 million hectares of 2.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide. That's the equivalent of the annual emissions from India. So this is an issue that requires a lot of discussion, and I'm delighted that today we're joined by a fantastic panel who can begin to demystify the future of REDD+ financing for us. From the World Bank, we're very lucky to be joined by our senior carbon finance specialist, Andres Espejo. From Emergent, the executive director, Aaron Bloomgarden, has joined us all the way from the World Economic Forum in Davos. Thank you, Aaron. From Ghana's Forestry Commission, Rosalind Fosuo Adjei is the director of climate change and the REDD+ focal point, so nobody better to talk to us from a country perspective. And we also have Daniel Candy from the United States Department of State, who's the director of Sustainable Landscapes. Please, everybody, we want this to be an interactive session. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. That's in the bottom panel on your Zoom screen, and we will try and get to as many of them as we can. But before we start with our panel, I want to turn over to the World Bank's lead operations officer, Jose Andrew, to set the stage for our discussion. Jose, over to you.
Thank you, Valerie. Good morning, everyone. And thank you also to the panelists for being here, and big thanks and welcome to all the participants to this event. We are here today to talk about the future of REDD+ financing, as Valerie said, but let's for a moment look at the past and take a stock on what we have learned so far that is informing our future work. I'm sure that there's a great deal of experts on forest and sustainable land use today here with us. So this is probably an everyday experience for you all, but we know that deforestation and forest degradation contribute approximately to 12% of the world's CO2 emissions. We also know that nature-based solutions, including forest, can provide around 40% of the mitigation needed to keep temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius and drive local resilience and economic opportunities. We have learned since our first pilot programs for the FCPF in 2008 and for the Biocarbon Fund ISFL in 2013 that protecting forest and supporting sustainable land use initiatives through REDD+ is a very effective approach to tackling climate change and preserving biodiversity, as well as in addition to other economic, health, and lifestyle benefits. We know that REDD+ programs don't happen without challenges, hard work and collaboration, right? We have learned that success takes time. A clear example of this is, for instance, in FCPF, several countries that we started working with 15 years ago needed much more capacity building support than originally envisaged in order to be ready to develop and implement their emission reductions programs. We know that REDD+ programs can't happen without people and local communities to support and deliver them. Local communities have helped us to craft our programs to be relevant and right for the communities where they operate in areas such as the development of benefit sharing plans, for instance, where they have played a crucial role. And on the technical side, we have developed sophisticated MRV tools that confirm that emission reductions generated from the programs are of the high quality that is necessary to maintain environmental integrity and that will appeal to to potential buyers. So we have learned through our work with the private sector that the World Bank plays an important role as a bridge between governments and private investors by using public finance to catalyze private capital for REDD+ programs. This is critical for developing countries where investment needs and climate risk are the highest. So to summarize, we have learned that REDD+ programs will not be successful unless they are driven by REDD+ communities and everyone has a role to play. So this is what we have been seeing in the past and all the lessons we have learned over the years, right? Or some of them. So now to the future of REDD+. Again, I'm sure that everyone is aware that the world faces a huge challenge to mobilize trillions of dollars in the coming decade to achieve our most pressing climate and development targets. Right? Financing is needed to incentivize climate action, to build the capacity and infrastructure upon which climate projects and carbon markets will rely on. When it comes to reducing emissions in the land use sector, we know that programs are costly, and it is, I think, unreasonable to believe that all the cost can be borne by either national or donor governments. We are therefore helping governments to crowd in funding for forest protection and sustainable forest management. The FCPF and the SFL are pioneers in large-scale emission reduction programs that use results-based climate finance to bring together all actors, including national and local governance and the private sector and local communities. Building on these programs and over 20 years of experience in the World Bank in the results-based climate finance field, we are now developing a new instrument, the Climate Emission Reduction Facility, or CERF, that I hope you all have heard of by now. CERF is going to be the one-stop shop for all the results-based climate finance within the World Bank, and will be launched at COP27 in Egypt. CERF is structured around 3 pillars, and I'm not going to go into detail in it, but CERF's Natural Climate Solution Pillar, or Pillar 1, expands on the successes of FCPF and ISFL to include sustainable forest and land use, blue carbon, climate smart agriculture, and forest carbon stock conservation. CERF, through this pillar, would provide a new revenue stream to REDD+ programs, showing how results-based climate finance can help to drive upfront capital investments and will support countries to access carbon markets through technical assistance and capacity building. And now, this is basically an overview of what we think we have learned, what we are looking at the future in the bank. And now I will really look forward to hearing from our esteemed panelists here, who will elaborate on their learnings from REDD+ programs, including finance and resources to support the future of REDD+ financing. Thank you again. Thank you all for your attention. And Valerie, back to you.
Thank you, Jose. One thing you said has really stuck in my mind, and this idea that if we want to integrate development, climate, and nature, which we all do, doing that through nature-based services could alone be the solution to 40% of our mitigation problem. That's amazing. And I think what you said about the fact that this is going to need the right policies, it's going to need strong institutions, it's going to need the support and the consent of Indigenous peoples and local communities, and it's going to need lots of money. And these are all the topics we're going to talk about with our panel right now. So Andres, let me jump right to you, because Jose set you up for this question when he talked about the 20 years of REDD+ financing that the World Bank has engaged in. Can you tell us a little bit about what the REDD+ options are at the World Bank, and over those 20 years, what has changed?
Yes, thank you, Valerie, for that question. Let me share just a slide to give an overview. Yeah, in the slide that you can see in your screens, you can see an overview of the different initiatives supporting REDD+ financing, ranging from upstream support to governments, on technical assistance, capacity building, no market finance, for example, the GCF pilot program, ranging to market finance, which includes, for example, standards that are currently CERF eligible, such as the art trees or the architecture for REDD plus transactions. trees stands for the REDD Environmental Excellence Standard, or VERA's jurisdictional nested REDD. As well as the LEAF Coalition, who Aaron will speak later about that, that is providing finance for emission reductions, generated under our trees, which could be both non-market and market finance. So that's more or less what we have out there. Most of the initiatives that I mentioned, if not all, they have built on the work done by the FCPF and ISFL, who have been supporting 19 plus countries in the development of their mitigation strategies, in the creation of the regulatory, technical, and institutional framework, including the creation of a creating standard that didn't exist back then, although now we have many more standards, plus financial rewards. And the interesting thing of the FCPF is that it has been, as you can see in your screen, it has been covering, upstream support, non-carbon, non-market and market options, creating standards. And what is important is that it has enabled this enabling environment or framework that would generate or has generated already high-quality emission reductions, which, of course, they can be paid by the World Bank, but they are also available to markets. So basically, would increase the origination of volumes that are available to third-party buyers. So just to give you an example of the proof of concept is already there. Last year, the FCPF, the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, paid $6.4 million for reducing 1.28 million tons of carbon emissions. Made this paid to Mozambique. And what is important is not only the payment and the fact that now this is moving to local communities through the established benefit sharing arrangements, but also that the Mozambique has been able to generate 0.7 million of additional emission reductions that are not paid by the bank and are available to third-party buyers. So basically, we already see that basically all this support from the FCPF ISFL has enabled Mozambique to create that infrastructure that enabled them to access carbon markets. CERF. So next slide. CERF basically is we are building, as Jose mentioned, on FCPF and ISFL, and it's basically taking this to the next level. So basically, increased ambition of NDCs. The idea is to enable countries to access to result-based climate finance, but as well enable them to transact ITMOs, for example. So the international transferable mitigation outcomes. The idea of CERF will be also to establish linkages with other initiatives that we see up there in the slide. So, for example, supporting other standards. So the generation of high quality ERs will not only be from FCPF ISFL, but it could be also from our trees, for example. So potentially, this support could generate volumes that could also be available to LEAF or to other third-party buyers. And also CERF, what is very important is that we will also take it to the next level, the enhanced social and environmental benefits. So we are looking into supporting basically, how we can quantify social inclusion and how we can monetize or help countries to monetize these additional co-benefits. So it just in and I will stop here, but just in a nutshell, how private sector can participate in all this. Well, first of all, the origination side. The World Bank, with its convening power, is helping in the origination, which we all know that currently the market is pretty tight, and there are concerns, and there's a lack of high quality or enough volume of high quality emission reductions. So we will be supporting that, so helping countries to be able to support markets, but also access to carbon finance. In the design of in basically our upstream support to countries, we always support them to crowd-in finance, not only from the bank, but also from the private sector. So basically, private sector can participate in or can support the implementation of mitigation actions as part of the REDD+ programs. And then there's a key component that is instrumental to us, that is the benefit sharing. It's not only about helping countries to access finance, but helping communities to be able to access that finance, and especially supporting social inclusion. No? So those communities that are not able to access to that, no, like minority groups, etc. So the idea is also to enhance the benefit sharing, and the private sector could also participate in these benefit sharing arrangements. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Andres. As a fellow World Banker, it's absolutely wonderful to see the innovation that's taking place over the past 20 years and how we continue to try and build and accelerate those high quality emissions reductions you're talking about. But Erin, let me turn to you, because Emergent has always been at the center of innovation and climate action and climate finance. And you've always been thinking about how to bring private finance to the table. You've been working very closely recently with the LEAF Coalition. That's the coalition, for those of you who don't know, to lower emissions by accelerating forest finance. Can you tell us a little bit about that partnership and speak a little bit about how do we get more private sector finance into the REDD+ financing?
Thanks for the question. Let me come back to that question. I wanted to come to the title of the panel, which is the future of REDD financing. And I think to address that, we need to look at the past for a minute. And so some of you may remember COP13 in Bali, when REDD+ was announced, hit the international community. And at that time we had close to €30 carbon price in the European ETS. The thought was, it's going to take us a year to develop the institutional framework for REDD+. We've got this built-in demand, and we're solving deforestation. Well, fast forward, to now, and it hasn't really happened. And what happened was the demand really fell out of the bottom of the market. The European emissions trading system, the price went down to under €5. There were some technical issues with REDD+ itself that took a bit longer to work through the system, and we find ourselves today, and I think, and one reason that we haven't seen traction over the last 15 years on REDD is because of the lack of that demand signal. And so one of the things that we've tried to do with Emergent and with LEAF Coalition is to provide that long-term demand signal, so that you can really provide the political and economic incentives to invest in reversing deforestation. So what's different now? And over the last 18 to 24 months, it's been extraordinary, the amount of private sector demand that's come into the market looking for high quality nature-based solutions, right? We may not be calling this REDD+ anymore. We're now calling it nature-based solutions or natural climate solutions, which is fine. But the point is, we've got massive demand from the corporate sector. And what's different there is we've got these companies now aligning around long-term net zero commitments and thinking about how they use emission reduction credits to address their residual emissions. In many respects, the institutional framework to support the voluntary carbon market is really catching up around criteria for the buyers, standards. But I want to say, one reason I make that point is I've been talking to a lot of investors over the last several months, and what I hear a lot of is, how can we deploy into advanced technology solutions, direct air capture, cold fusion, things like that are very expensive now, that are long-term investments. Yes, we need to make those investments, but we know how to reduce deforestation. This is not an issue of technology, and it's now not an issue of demand either. We've got finance, we've got corporates, we've got the demand. So what is it? It's really a question of implementation, coordination, and collaboration, an effective collaboration between public, private, and civil society and NGOs. And that's what we tried to create with Emergent. And so I will try and share a slide here to explain how Emergent works. So Emergent is the coordinator of the LEAF Coalition. So folks know, there's not an organization called LEAF Coalition. LEAF is the coalition of corporates and donor countries that are involved in this initiative. But Emergent is the entity that is the administrating and coordinating leaf. And the goal here is to provide large scale and fast deployment of these purchase agreements. Two things I'd point out. One is we focus on jurisdictional REDD+ as opposed to projects. The second is we've been very focused on building from the outset, not only high integrity standards on the supply side through the R3 standard and making sure that the credits are real, additional, third-party verified, all of those things that we want to see on the supply side, but also ensuring that the demand that corporates are using these credits to address their residual emissions and doing everything they can within their value chains and operations to reduce their own emissions. So how does it work? So Emergent really sits in the middle. And I should mention Emergent is a nonprofit. It operates in a transactional way, but it is a nonprofit. What that allows us to do is be independent and mission focused. And also very, very nimble. And so what we have is we have both corporates and governments providing the ability for us to make purchase commitments to jurisdictions. The corporates sign 5-year forward purchase agreements, and the governments provide a purchase guarantee, a buyer of last resort, which acts as a floor price. And that allows us then to sign 5-year forward offtake agreements with jurisdictions. The intention here is to do this in a very transparent way, by high integrity and high quality. We're seeing, in terms of how we're thinking about the future, as I said, the demand is there. We now have 25 companies that are part of the LEAF Coalition, all of which are big multinational companies. The minimum commitment is $10 million over a 5-year period. Some are in for much, much larger. And participation is accelerating. And we know that even with the existing corporates, many of them can go much bigger. So what's the constraint? The constraint is our ability to show high quality, real increasing ambition on the supply side. So that's really where we're focused. Let me just maybe close by saying we're very focused on this unique mission, facilitating these transactions and collaborating with the bank, with civil society, with other NGOs, with the public sector, Indigenous, local communities. But the last point I'll just make is really single-minded focus on speed and scale because of what you laid out at the beginning, right? We all know not only climate emergency, biodiversity emergency, extinction crisis, and severe severe issues with local communities. I'm here in Davos, as you mentioned, and one of the major themes has been the food crisis, which is really resulting from droughts. Much of it was caused by climate change, but also exacerbated by the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. So let me close there and look forward to the discussion.
No, thank you, Aaron. And I think it's so important to talk about how demand has changed and how it really is one of the pieces of the puzzle that is finally falling into place. But from demand, and as you mentioned, supply is equally important, and having that pipeline of high quality emissions. I want to turn to Rosalind. And Rosalind, of course, we're all talking about the importance of REDD+ to protect forests and to provide development dividends for the communities who live there and for the countries who host those forests. Is REDD+ working for you and for Ghana? And when you hear what Aaron talks about in terms of needing more supply of high quality emissions reductions, is that something Ghana is discussing?
Thank you very much, Valerie, and greetings from Accra. Thank you for having us to share our experiences on what is happening in Ghana. And really listening to all the opening statements, fantastic statements, the talk about speed and skill from Aaron, and then also the mention from Andres about CERF and how the FCPF has been in the space. And for Ghana, we see REDD+ as very, very important because this whole discussion about nature-based solutions or whatever name we want to give to it, I believe that the whole REDD+ discussion has held the fort and proven that this concept works up until now. Because at the global negotiation space, it got to a time that it was really very difficult to prove that this is what we are saying and this is the case we are making, and to attract the needed financing, even up until now, that we know that 40% of the solution that we are looking for is possibly with nature-based solutions or with forests, or whatever name we want to call it. Where is the financing? And so for Ghana, REDD+ is key, but it is key to the extent to which it is enabled to become tangible. And we are at a point where we really want to see the tangibility of what we are talking about. Our communities want to see the tangibility of a 12-year readiness space. And at this point, I really want to appreciate the FCPF, because I believe that the FCPF has really supported the countries like Ghana to move through the whole REDD+ scope, to keep grinding and to keep demonstrating that there is something that we can do to avoid deforestation and forest degradation. It's possible with the right resources. Now, going forward in terms of looking at REDD+ financing, countries like Ghana, I believe, want to maximize the best opportunities that are out there. LEAF has come on board. Ghana is part of it. Ghana is already in the Carbon Fund. We're looking forward to being the second country to receive our results-based payments. Other private sector interests are also showing up, aside what we are working on through LEAF. But it's important that all this sort of converges at a point and we have some level of harmonization. We are beginning to realize that there could be some issues in terms of how we sort of frame the term high integrity, because the Carbon Fund MET framework is different from the R3 standard. So if you use the two per the reference levels, you could be getting different quantities of emission reductions for one single year. So which one is high integrity over the other? And that's the point where I think that the discussion should now be leading to, because now there's a lot of finance coming up into the space, there's interest from private sector entities, but there are multiplicity of standards, and the standards could produce overlapping years for single years, which are going to different entities. So what really defines what is high integrity? Because I mean, I've been in the Carbon Fund discussion for so long. I know it's of high integrity. R3s is on. I know about R3s. I've been through a full orientation program. I know it's high integrity. But if you apply the different reference levels, you are getting different numbers. So at what point are we able to harmonize that so that countries can maximize these benefits, particularly for the local communities that we talk about, and then also to add up to the numbers in ensuring that we keep 1.5 within reach and we keep it alive. So that will be my opening statement for now. I'm looking forward to this wonderful discussion, as this happens to be one of the panels that I know almost everybody on the panel, so it's already exciting. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Rosalind. And you bring up an extremely important point, which is this idea that for suppliers like Ghana, when there's this multiplicity of standards, how do you begin to navigate that? How do you know which is the right price? How do you know you're not selling your emissions reductions at a lower price than you could get somewhere else because somebody doesn't consider it to be high integrity? What does that look like? And I think it's such an important point, something I think everyone around this virtual table is listening to, including Dan. Dan, I want to bring you in from the US. The US has been a big supporter, including a big financial donor to REDD+ financing globally. When you've been listening to everything you hear today, the issues with demand, the issues with supply, what is the US government looking to see change to ensure that you can continue supporting REDD+ and see it go at that speed and scale everybody is looking for in the future? Sorry, Dan, you're still muted. Can we get you unmuted? Still muted. And somebody let me know. Try it now. Dan, can you try again? No. Dan, let me do this. Let me quickly go back to the others for a lightning round because we're not hearing you. And I'm going to let our tech guys quickly get in touch with you. And we will bring you back in just in a couple of minutes. But I want to make sure, given the time we have. So I'm going to do a quick lightning round from some of the questions we've got in from our participants. So this is a lightning round. So I'm going to ask everyone to keep their answers to less than 1 minute. So Andres, let me turn to you first. And we've got questions from Jose Restrepo and from Paul Anderson. First, from Jose Restrepo, what's the price that was paid by the World Bank for the DRC credits? And second, will the CERF include carbon removal options, not just emissions reduction? So it's sort of a very simple question, and we can have a simple answer even if there's lots behind it.
Yeah, okay, that's two questions, but only 1 minute. So, okay, no, so regarding the first question on the, just to clarify, because the question was mentioning brokerage, just to clarify that the World Bank is not broker, is paying for emission reductions, okay, and the price that has been agreed with all 15 emission reduction programs under the FCPF is $5 a ton. You might think that currently looking at the prices that are out there, that $5 a ton might be pretty low, but it's important to note that most of the 95% of the emission reductions that are paid for, those will be returned to the country so that they can be used for their NDCs. So this is not something that the World Bank will hold or one of our donor species will use to compensate their emissions. So that's very important. That's supporting the NDCs. And also that in order to generate those emission reductions, the World Bank has been providing a lot of support. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of crowding from World Bank finance, from other operations. We have been providing a lot of support on capacity building and technical assistance, which that should be factored in. Another thing is what, as I mentioned earlier, the idea is not to have like a standalone transaction. The idea is to support the country to demonstrate a proof of concept. And once they demonstrate the proof of concept, they will be able to access to much greater finance, right? So as Aaron mentioned, there is not much proof of concept yet on the supply side. So basically the idea is
it's like every good world banker, you take the entry point of one question and you're going past. I want to make sure we get everybody else into. So very quickly, is there going to be carbon removal also in the CERF? Will it pay for that?
Yes, carbon removal is included.
Thank you so much, Andres. And let me turn to you, Aaron, again for a 1 minute answer. And we got a question from Nia at MacJ, and forgive me if I've pronounced that wrongly. She believes there's been some pushback against the work of the LEAF Coalition in countries like Peru from the public sector. What are you hearing, and how do you make sure the public sector buys?
Listen, I think the question was also included in Indonesia, but I mean, this is not, simple. There's a complexity for countries, even digesting what Article 6 means and the guidance from Glasgow. And then in the case of Indonesia, there have been, long history of bilateral results-based payment commitments that have had some complexity. So I view it, or maybe I like to view it as temporary, and not pushback, but temporary. Hey, let's figure out what we want to do internally and how we assess not only our participation with LEAF or any other RBP, but also how do we think about making corresponding adjustments, complying with Paris? How does this fit in? And that's logical. And I see this as sort of a temporary. Okay, let's get our house in order. I just want to make one quick point, and as usual, Rosalind has really put her finger on the key. If there's one theme coming out of this, I think we need to simplify, both for the supply side, for the public sector, the forest countries, and the demand. It's far too complex right now for both. There's not enough long-term guidance. We've got a multiplicity of standards, and this is what we're dealing with when we've got the norms and standards of the market emerging, and we don't have a compliance market. But I really hope, as a community of practice here around REDD+, we can all try to come together and think, how do we simplify this, and really create long-term guidance for both supply and demand. We can talk a lot more about that, but I think that's a key.
Thank you, Aaron. And obviously, this is just a taste of what everybody could share on the various programs. Rosalind, I'm going to come to you in a minute. I'm going to come to Dan first, but just so you can begin to prepare, we've got two questions from Carlos Corsini and Sylvia Calderon about the importance of capacity building programs for Indigenous peoples and local communities so that they can be part of the supply chain. And I'm going to come to you in a few minutes to ask you what you're seeing and how that's working and how important that is in a country like Ghana to make sure that we do get those development dividends as much as we get the climate and the nature protections. But Dan, let me come back to you again. I'm so glad we can hear you now, and thank you, Tech, for helping. What is the US thinking in terms of what it's looking for to continue being such a big supporter of the REDD+?
Thanks. Hopefully you can hear me now. I'll take that as a yes. I think as Erin was saying, we are seeing a phase shift and evolution in the world of REDD+ and results-based payments and carbon markets, and donors are going to have to be responsive to that phase shift. We've got our feet in two worlds, essentially: the traditional world of official development assistance that goes towards technical support, capacity building, and efforts to implement jurisdictional REDD+ programs, support for monitoring systems, safeguards, REDD+ readiness, essentially. And I think we'll continue to want to play a role in that space. There's a renewed interest from countries and jurisdictions in engaging in REDD+. The FCPF, as many of you know, is divided into the Readiness Fund and the Carbon Fund, and you had a much greater number of countries engaged in the Readiness Fund who maybe didn't move on to engage in the Carbon Fund to receive results-based payments. But now some of those countries who underwent readiness activities under the FCPF are looking to engage in LEAF or other ways to enter the results-based payment space. With that renewed interest in a number of jurisdictions wanting to come online, donors, I think, will have to be positioned to support those efforts and make sure there's an opportunity to come to the table and engage in these financing modalities. But there's also an opportunity now for donors to more explicitly and directly use support to crowd in corporate and private sector finance. And that's certainly what compelled us to join with Emergent and engage in the LEAF Coalition, this public-private partnership where we, along with the UK and Norway as government donors, are able to crowd in the private sector by helping to alleviate some delivery risk, providing a floor price, a purchase guarantee, potentially allocating demand to jurisdictions that in the near term may not have significant corporate demand, but as additional demand signal comes online, will down the road, and making sure those jurisdictions stay at the table and have resources coming online. So I think we'll continue to do that traditional upfront financing and technical support capacity building, but we'll really start to look more directly to catalytic approaches like are offered by the LEAF Coalition, like the CERF is exploring, and those will really be key to efficiently using the limited resources we have as governments and overall scaling up finance going to nature-based solutions and REDD+.
No, thank you, Dan. And I think, again, that this speaks to the fact that everybody needs to have more REDD+ financing on the table, and it needs to be done in a way where we're getting the money at speed and at scale to the countries that are protecting their forests. So Rosalind, I'm going to come back to you again, because this issue of readiness, Dan has just raised it, we got it in the chat, in not just the readiness of governments, but also the readiness of Indigenous peoples and local communities. Can you speak a little bit to what you're seeing in Ghana?
Thank you, Valerie. Really, the readiness of Indigenous people and local communities is very key for any successful REDD+ program. In Ghana, this is very well articulated by our benefit sharing plan for emission reductions payments. At the moment, 69% of the ER payments are going directly to local communities and to the people within the jurisdictions. It's not just about government policy. Government policy has to be implemented. Somebody has to give legs to government policy. Now, within the context of avoiding deforestation and forest degradation, we have communities who are directly in touch with these resources, living with them. It's a part of their lives. If they are actively engaged and if their interest is within that particular space, not just to support government, but also to really support their livelihood enhancement capacities. And if that is the approach for REDD+ implementation, it means that then there should be that tangibility or commensurate results going to communities. So no doubt, getting IPs and local communities at the right place in terms of capacity building, sensitization, awareness creation, also decision-making for Ghana. for every decision that we are making, we have come up with governance structures that are very, very unique and phenomenal, involving the landscape actors. We have our farmers there, we have our other community members there, we have the youth there, we have women there. There are percentages for women representation to ensure that there's inclusivity. We have transparent structures that are self-accountable to the whole REDD+ structure and architecture in country. I believe that this gives the local communities, in Ghana's case, we don't have indigenous people, we have local communities, but it gives them the power, it gives them the necessary recognition, and it also tells them that we are in a paradigm of forest management and collaborative natural resources management. That is not just about government policy, it's not just about what government wants, it's not just about what private sector wants, it's about what we all want, and the weighted, if I can use the word, averages of our various rights to what we want, because government can claim that we want the forest, but really what right we have over those forests in terms of the ownership, in terms of ownership of trees, ownership of land, and all that. So that has all factored into our decision-making process, arriving at the fact that we need the local communities to be really prepared, to be the legs that carry out all the different strategies that are developed, of course, with them as well, because they are in touch with the resources. And who better than the one who is in touch with the resource, and the resource directly influencing the livelihood opportunities. In our case, we are looking at a community-based approach to REDD+ implementation. And we began with the cocoa and high forest area, where we have cocoa as a very important commodity for Ghana. And the cocoa is grown by smallholder farmers. So if the smallholders do not catch the vision, the smallholders do not understand the language, then the program is not really going to achieve the success that we want. Fortunately for us, the smallholders, through the readiness process, sensitizing institutional capacity building, have come to understand that climate change is really happening. And they also are able to tell that it is having an impact on their agricultural productivity. And so they are rather giving us the support that we need as government to channel this and to move this forward. And that's why they are receiving 69% of the benefits as long as we're able to produce results. So I can confidently say that this is very important, and it is actually the right way to go. Thank you.
I think it speaks to the importance again of integrating development, conservation, and climate, and that if we do it together in this collaborative forest management that you talk about with communities at the forefront, then that's when we can really achieve these triple wins. And let me go back to you. We've had another question from DJ. Apparently my audio is bad again. Let me try and make it better. Specifically about high forest, low deforestation countries. Will they be eligible for support under CERF?
Yes, thanks so much. In fact, it's eligible already under FCPF, so we provide result-based finance to Republic of Congo or Democratic Republic of Congo. Under CERF, it will continue being the case. Just to mention that, for example, under our trees, there are new requirements regarding HFLD countries that would enable any HFLD country to access to climate finance. But we are conscious of this need, and we are also looking into other ways to convey climate finance beyond basically the classical emission reduction side.
And to you, Aaron, what is the one secret of success to getting the private sector to the table and to make sure that the table is not scaring away the public sector?
I'm not sure I heard the question. Valerie, I think your audio is not great.
Forgive me, I'm sorry, I don't know what, and I'm not shouting at you if that's what it seems like, but what's the one secret to success for getting the private sector to the table and making sure that it's not greenwashing and that their presence doesn't scare away the public sector from investing in REDD+ finance?
Well, listen, I think the two separate questions. I mean, a secret to success, I think, is recognizing that carbon emission reduction credits are a different type of asset, a different type of commodity, in that it's not just about delivering at the best possible price. It is about maintaining quality, integrity from the point of production throughout the delivery, making sure that there's impact on the ground, communities are involved, that there's not excessive profit taking, and that this is all the entire exercise is in support of environment, communities, biodiversity, impact. That's the key. And the way we've done that, or attempt to do that, is actually is through this coalition approach, right? So bringing corporates together with public sector in what we view as a real, true public-private partnership, where everyone has skin in the game, right? There's, everybody is putting money in, putting support in, putting time in, to try and make this, to try and make it work.
Dan, does that resonate with you from the public sector? Does that make sense in terms of catalyzing support, using public finance to catalyze support from the private sector?
It does make sense. I think there's definitely a role that we've embraced as the US, and I'd say many of the other donors, in thinking about innovative ways to catalyze private sector finance. And we've appreciated the partnership with Emergent through LEAF as one of those modes for catalytic finance. I do think that there's got to be a kind of right sizing for donors of catalytic finance. If we want REDD+ to be scaled up to the scope that's needed to address the climate crisis, donors can't come in and backstop every transaction or provide a floor price guarantee in every case. And so I think we'll want to think about gaining experience through LEAF and CERF and others, this right sizing of donor support, and then also what the off ramps might be, so that these results-based payments programs become, self-sustaining with private sector demand and finance. But certainly in the near term, I think there's still a continued role for the public sector in that kind of catalytic capital.
Rosalind, let me give you the last word. If you had one ask on how we scale up at speed REDD+ financing for everybody around the virtual table today, what would it be?
Thank you, Valerie. That's a hard one. Just one take. Well, what would it be? I think that for me, it would be that we should all begin to understand each other. And I think it's key. It might be very simple, but considering that we've come this far, we should begin to understand what the concerns of everybody within this space is. What is the concern of the local person? Is this just about the results-based payments? I heard Daniel talk about like results-based payments becoming self-sustaining, or exactly. At what point will results-based finance become self-sustaining? It could be in the next 2 years for Ghana. It could be in the next 5 years for another country. At what point would private sector commitments be okay? Is it when they achieve their net zero targets? At what point would public institutions also see that, oh, we are okay with this, we've been able to restore our forests up until this stage? I think that we are all at different levels, but we need to understand each other on a particular common platform. And we can only do that when we still continue to engage and we still continue to get into what the real issues are for each particular country that is trying as much as possible to be very relevant within this whole climate change discussion, not just for the global picture of 1.5, but also to build some sort of models in country that enhance economic development, social development, and then also environmental development. It's very key that we do that. And talking about that, I also want to talk about the other enablers that we should begin to look at. Is it just about results-based payments? I know that, for example, Enable is coming up, and we still need such finance to cushion certain gaps, to cushion certain areas where support is needed. LEAF is coming on board with private sector support. There are still some gaps that have to be filled for countries that have been in the carbon fund portfolio, now moving on to the R3 standard. There are some gaps that we need to fill, either with safeguards or with MRE. There is still that finance that is needed because our beneficiary plans for carbon fund were not put together with this sort of cushioning in place. Who continues to take care of that? I think it's good that the World Bank has enabled to support capacity building, like for the local communities. Can we do for other areas? So these are some of the thoughts that come to mind as we move forward.
Rosalind.
Exactly. Thank you.
No, thank you so very much. And thank you, everybody. We could have stayed having this conversation for 8 hours today because there's so much richness among the panelists But it's true that if we're going to get REDD+ financing at the speed and scale necessary to stop the devastation, it means demand has to be robust, but it also can't lead to a multiplicity of standards. It means that supply has to be about high integrity. It needs to have communities at the center. It needs to be supported by strong policies and credible institutions. And it needs to have common definitions and a common understanding, as Rosalind said. We need to understand each other. We need to share that joint collaboration of forest management to make this work and pay attention to the development aspect, to climate and to conservation. Thank you so very much, everybody. Thank you to the World Bank for setting up this discussion this morning. And please enjoy the rest of the I4C discussions. Thank you.